everybody, I'm Lumpy the Pumpkin, and I am here to welcome you back to the Jay the Reader channel, where we talk about everything books, spooky stuff, and middle grade horror. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It is greatly appreciated. Now sit back and try to relax, because this video will give you goosebumps.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am Jay the Reader, and today we're going to be talking about a Goosebumps book. Let's get into this. In today's video, we're going to be talking about The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. This is one of the earlier Goosebumps books. It's a little bit different than the later ones, and I think that's good. I think it's better than the later ones. So yeah, let's dive in. As always, I like to say that there is going to be spoilers in this video. This book came out in the 90s, so I'm not sure if you viewers really care about that, but I always like to give the warning so I don't say something, and if you've never read this book, it gives something away. This book follows siblings Grady and Emily. Grady's our main character here. They just moved to Florida to a swamp where their parents are scientists, and they are studying these type of swamp deer. And they just went out, I'd actually say in the book that they went over the sea, and got them from another country and brought them back. So they're there to monitor how these swamp deer react to the swamp in Florida. The swamp's kind of creepy. The kids aren't real fond of it. They don't really know what to think. They just know that they gotta do it because they're kids and their parents moved there. But they kind of hold a grudge a little bit against their parents. They didn't want to go. So they have an attitude in the beginning, but they start exploring the swamp, and that's when things get interesting. So I like this part. It really set up the environment and the scenery. It really made the picture in your head super vivid. Emily and Grady just kind of decide to go, in the very beginning of the book, they decide to go into the swamp and just explore, and they find a bog, and the way R.L. Stine describes it in here, it's just super vivid, and it almost feels like you're in the swamp with them, and I really like that. And they are exploring the swamp, and they notice that it's really kind of dingy and creepy, and the air is thick. And when they find the bog, I think Grady even makes a joke I wonder how many dead bodies are under there. And it's just really kind of atmospheric. But while they're exploring, they also find this little shack in the middle of the woods, and there's a hermit that lives out there, and he's creepy too. They think that he's a killer, and they actually disturb the hermit. And that he starts chasing the kids through the woods, and they tell their parents about it, and the parents are like, of course that guy's harmless, I've heard about him. When we first looked into moving here, they told us about the wood hermit, or the swamp hermit, and he's harmless, don't worry about him. But they really he got a scare out of the two children. Then late one night, Grady is sleeping, and he hears howling coming from out in the swamp, and he gets up to kind of see what's going on, and then he hears a scratching at the door. He obviously thinks that there's a monster out there, and what actually it ends up being is a dog named Wolf. And he names the dog Wolf, he becomes his pet, and it's a dog named Wolf, because he names him that because he looks like a wolf. And he was no harm, it was actually just the dog at the door. And then he also has a friend named Will that he makes inside this little community along the swamp, and Will's a next door neighbor. Will is kind of like a redneck, that's how it's described in here. I don't mean that as a derogatory term, that's how it's described in here, a redneck. And he is odd, but very nice. Grady becomes very fond of him. They become very good friends. They go out exploring the swamp, and they actually run into the hermit a couple times, and Will tells Grady that the hermit's harmless pretty much, but he's definitely kind of creepy. Grady continues to hear the howling outside at night, and he realizes there's a full moon out there, so he assumes that it's a werewolf. And his parents are like, oh, werewolves aren't real for one thing, but there's also no wolves in this area of Florida. There will be no wolves in a swamp. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really reassure Grady all that much. His sister kind of goes along with it, Emily. He's like, oh yeah, there's no wolves. It's probably just a coincidence that you're hearing howling. That's kind of stupid. Obviously there's a wolf out there if it's howling, or some sort of animal. And they determine that it's not Wolf either, because the dog Wolf, his new dog Wolf, because it just isn't probably maybe it's the dog, but apparently they determined that it's not him. I would have assumed it's probably the dog, because the dog sleeps outside. I will say the book meanders a little bit. It really doesn't pick up steam until the second half, and I thought that was kind of I don't think it really worked in its favor. I think it could have been, yeah, you had some of the swamp hermit stuff chasing the kids, but it's pretty clear from the beginning of the book that he's not the bad guy. He's just an old cranky man who chases kids out of his little shack in the woods. Like, it's pretty clear. So there was a little meandering, but other than that, when we get to the second half, it does pick up, and it picks up steam really fast. And I was surprised because like it actually like depicts like something's killing animals, like, and it describes it in vivid detail. There's a bird that's like torn apart, and it describes it. It was like torn apart. Its entrails are everywhere. There's a bunny that they see that's torn apart, and that thing they say is ripped in half. And it was gruesome. Like, I was like, dang. Like, obviously now they should realize there's some creature out there. Of course, the sister Emily blames all these dead animals on Grady's dog, Wolf. And Grady's like, it couldn't be the dog, but she's like, your dog could kill her, and I don't trust him, and I'm staying away from your dog. Another character that ends up being in this book is Cassie. It's another neighborhood kid around Grady and Will's age. She's only in it for like a quarter of the book. She's not like an integral character, but she's in there, and she starts to say that there's a werewolf in the woods, in the swamp, not the woods, sorry, the swamp, and that it's the swamp hermit. She thinks he's a werewolf, and Grady's like, maybe, and Will's like, there's no such thing as werewolves, but whatever. And but she keeps pushing the point, and finally Grady comes to the conclusion that there is a werewolf in the swamp, because one night he comes outside and he hears the howling again, and he realizes it's not Wolf, it's not his dog, whatever, and he goes out to the deer pen, and the deer pen is wide open, and the creature slaughtered one of the deer, and it is graphic. It is graphic. For a children's book, it is graphic, and it surprised me. At this point, the dad actually thinks it's the dog doing all this killing. Like, he's like, okay, your dog is killing animals. It just killed our research animal, the deer, and we're taking it to the pound. And Grady's like, no, you're not taking my dog to the pound. They're gonna put him down, yada, 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 whatever. The dad tries to take him to the pound the next day, and Grady gets him to run into the swamp and run away, and it kind of saves the dog. And then later that night, he hears the howling again. He runs into the swamp. He's like, I gotta figure this out. And then he hears someone walking behind him, and it's Will. And Will's like, hey man, let's try to discover what this noise is together. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out what is killing all these animals. It's also alluded to that a man went missing, so you can assume what killed this one man too. Pretty graphic stuff. So they go exploring, and then finally Grady loses track of Will in the swamp, and then he comes face to face with the werewolf. He starts fighting with this werewolf. This werewolf is attacking him, and he realizes in this moment that, oh no, this werewolf is Will. It was Will the whole time. Will was the werewolf, and is probably why he was denying that werewolves were real and shutting down Cassie's myths about there being a werewolf. That is probably why he was shutting them down, so it didn't lead them back to him. And yeah, I already knew this twist was coming because I grew up watching this episode. Well, it's actually 2 episodes, part 1 and 2. But I grew up watching the Werewolf Fever Swamp episodes, and so I knew Will was the werewolf. There was another twist at the end that I did forget about though, which I thought was pretty cool. Then Grady's dog, Wolf, his name is Wolf, comes back, and he attacks the werewolf, who is Will, and they start fighting and all this stuff, and he pretty much saves Grady's life. Grady wakes back up in his bed, and he's like, what happened? And mom and dad are like, the swamp hermit found you in the swamp, and he brought you here and brought you back to safety. And he said that Wolf defended you against some sort of creature. And at that point, the dad allows him to keep Wolf, and it kind of all wraps up there. And then it kind of flashes to a couple weeks later, and it's like talking about how he still hangs out with Casey sometimes, or Cassie, whatever her name is. But the big twist is this. At the end of the book, it is revealed that Grady was bitten by Will when he was in werewolf form. And it's a full moon one night, and it describes Grady turning into a werewolf and going out to hunt with his dog. And I thought that was a really cool twist. I forgot that even happened. I didn't even remember that from the episode. And really cool twist. I was not expecting them to make the main character into a villain in the end, but I thought that was awesome. Now, let's get into some of the things that I liked about this book. I love the setting. The swamp was really, 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 really cool. I thought that it was very atmospheric. I thought that it was super just, you could feel like the thickness in the air, and it felt like you were really there. I really love that. Another thing I really liked were the characters. They were nothing too like crazy and like deep, but they were fun to follow this group of characters. There was a lot of characters in this Goosebumps book. A lot of Goosebumps book only have like 2 or 3. There was a decent bit in here. You had the swamp hermit, the 2 friends, Emily, the sister, and the mom and dad, and Grady, and the dog. So there's a lot of characters in here. I really enjoyed that. But the number one thing that I really loved about this book was how far R.L. Stine took it. And this is a trend that I'm noticing in the earlier Goosebumps books, that he does not hold back, and he is not afraid to make them violent. He describes dead animals in here. It's alluded to that a man gets killed, like, and just these dead animal descriptions are pretty gruesome, even for like an adult standard. It's really, really good. That's the level that he took this to. I really liked it. Now there's one major gripe, and this is like the only one bad thing I can say about this book, is it takes way too long to actually get into like the action. Like there's a little bit of action in the beginning with the swamp hermit and all that, but it's pretty clear that the swamp hermit isn't the bad guy and that he's no harm. So halfway through your book, you start getting into like some dead animals and some killings by this werewolf. Little slow, but I don't think it took too much from the story. It's still really, really fun. Now let's get into my final rankings. On the fun ranking, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. It's a pretty fun book. A little slow in the beginning, but it does pick up steam, and when it picks up steam, it is greatly paced, so I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Let's do the scare ranking. On the scare ranking, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 as well. A 4 out of 5. For younger audiences, definitely this will be scary, but some of the descriptors in here are even scary for adults. It irked me in some spots. And yeah, 4 out of 5 is where it's sitting on my scare ranking. And now let's get into the overall ranking. Another 4 out of 5. I think that's fair. This book is really fun. It's not as good as Stay Out of the Basement. That's still my #1 favorite Goosebumps book, but it is really, really good. It is a must read for any Goosebumps fan. 4 out of 5 all the way. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, if you could give it a like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton and it costs you nothing. I will catch you on the next one. God bless.